time joining us, and welcome back to those of you who have been part of this ongoing journey through this pandemic and, in a larger sense, the journey of our lives at this time in history. I thought that this week maybe we would just begin with a moment or two of simply settling in and taking that good breath, a few breaths in and out, just to get ourselves on our way to where we want to be. So the chairs or on the floor or standing in the way that we are most comfortable, attentive and yet at ease. Let us unclench our hands and lay them quietly in our laps if we are sitting. We might even open them upwards and put one hand on each thigh. And let us just, I will ask you to please forgive any extraneous noise, as I am currently in Chicago with my 99-and-a-half-year-old father, and in an environment over which I have very little control. So, all right, let us take our positions and open our hands. I always close my eyes. You may wish to do that. You may wish just to focus them gently, softly on some nondescript point in the distance. And let us take that first deep, good breath. Way down into our entire bodies, all the way to the tips of our toes. Oh, and let us let it out. We may have done this earlier today, we may have done it yesterday, but every time we do it, it feels so good. Let us take that deep, full, healing breath. Let us luxuriate in the fullness for a moment. Even hold it for 3 or 4 seconds. And then some of us will let it out slowly. Some of us may just let it out. And we can pause also at the exhale, the next inhale. Feeling it expanding our ribs, filling us up, and letting it out again. I continue to find our exploration interesting, stimulating, and instructive. As I continue to think about the effects of the pandemic and the challenges of this time of transition that seems to be proceeding in fits and starts, I find myself wondering what the ongoing effects of this past year will be in each of our lives. This week, my thoughts are further intrigued by our Torah portion, which, because of the idiosyncrasies of the Jewish calendar, is a double portion entitled Acharei Mot, Kiddushim. While my interest is primarily in the second portion, that of Kiddushim, it is interesting to notice that the linking of the two portions, Acharei Mot and Kiddushim, actually translates as after death, holiness. I would like to think that after the enormous cost in death and suffering of this pandemic, we could emerge to a world that is more compassionate, more just, and more righteous. In short, a world that is more holy. We have traveled a complicated, complex time. We have confronted ugly, sometimes horrifying and unwelcome truths. Our souls have been tossed about on the waves of uncertainty and anxiety. We have all paid a price. While I do not believe that there is such a thing as a quid pro quo in the universe, I do believe that events can change how we perceive the world and how we act in response. That, it seems to me, is the challenge of our return to some semblance of normalcy. If we are going to bring a sense of meaning to these last 13 and who knows how many months eventually, if in the spirit of counting the Omer, we are going to make the time we have spent secluded, sequestered, distanced, and masked count for something other than treading water or wasting time or searching for ways around the restrictions, then we need to start imagining a different reality, a new reality, a better reality for our communities, our country, our world. I do not presume to know how to make this ideal happen. I do know that it is part of who we are as Jews to constantly envision a better world that is ultimately our responsibility to help bring about. I also know that this is an unusual time and offers an opportunity to take steps that would not normally be available to us. So let us pause for a moment and breathe in the possibilities that this time presents to us. We can breathe in all that this last year has meant. And if we're not quite sure of that, as I am not quite sure, we can at least breathe in a sense that in this moment, we have traveled. We can acknowledge that we have journeyed. We have endured in some ways. We have risen above in others. And each of us has done that. Let us breathe that in. And in this moment, let us breathe out the negatives we have felt. We do not deny them. We do not ignore them. But just in this moment, let us release them. Let us breathe in a looking forward. Let us breathe out a looking backwards. Let us breathe in the possibilities that will await upon emergence. Let us dare to imagine a better world, born of this unprecedented time, and thus evoking an unprecedented, unique response. Let us breathe that in. Oh. And perhaps we can envision one simple way in which each of us as individuals could make one small change in our own environment, one small way in which we might be the change we seek. And so if anything, as we breathe in possibility, let us breathe out a return to business as usual. Let us breathe in that one small adjustment in our lives that allows us to breathe out a complete return to what was. I'm not sure that can happen anyway. But let us be intentional about it. Breathing in the possibilities. Breathing out a rejection of all this year has taught us. As if in anticipation of our discussion and conversation today, the second Torah portion, Kedoshim, contains what is identified as the holiness code. Kedoshim means holiness. This is a section of the Torah that instructs us in clear, precise, and specific ways what it means to behave according to the highest standards of our tradition. The requirements of the Holiness Code may sound familiar to you because we read them on Yom Kippur, because they are that important. In other words, the Torah portion occurs in its regular cycle, which is now, and then we take excerpts from it for Yom Kippur afternoon. It reads in part, revere your mother and father, keep my Sabbaths, do not turn to idols. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap the corners of the field, nor may you strip your vineyard bare. You must leave them for the poor and the stranger. You must not steal. You must not act deceitfully. You must not swear falsely by my name. You must not oppress your neighbor. Do not commit robbery. Do not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block before the blind. Do not pervert justice, neither by favoring the poor, nor by deferring to the powerful. You must judge your neighbor fairly. You must not go about slandering your kin. You may not stand idly by when your neighbor's blood is being shed. You shall not hate another in your heart. And the great clarion call of the entire Torah, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Adonai. These commandments form the basis not only of a life of holiness, they form the foundation of a civilized society, one that is founded upon decency and respect for every individual, one that not only enshrines the dignity and worth of every human being, but protects the rights and privileges of every member of the community. Interestingly, this portion is in the middle of the book of Leviticus, which is itself the third of 5 books of the Torah, and thus is the middle book of the Torah. There is a tradition that holds that the phrase, "you shall love your neighbor as yourself," is literally, physically, at the very center of the Torah, meaning that there are as many words and phrases before and as many words and phrases after its appearance. It is another way of saying that the moral structure of the universe is based upon this one idea, this one ideal. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. It seems so simple, so accessible, so doable, and yet even a cursory glance at our world tells us it is observed more in the breach than in the reality. I would submit to you that most of the stories of heroism from this last year involve some form of this directive. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. There's a great deal of discussion among the rabbis as to what exactly is meant by love in this context and what is meant by neighbor. Well, I will not go into that debate at this time. I would suggest that part of what makes this ideal so difficult is that in order to truly love another, we have to love ourselves first. Many of us are plagued by profound feelings of unworthiness, of guilt, of shame, of insufficiency. We see ourselves as profoundly flawed and therefore profoundly unlovable. For most individuals, I believe, that is the source of romantic need. It is only when another human being loves us that we see ourselves as essentially lovable. That is part of romantic love's powerful effect. It's almost drug-like effect. It is the love of another that allows us to see ourselves as lovable. Without that, we may feel worthless, aimless, despondent, even desperate. The key to loving ourselves and loving our neighbors is in the next phrase after, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, which is, I am Adonai. In other words, I am the God who created you and every other person who ever lived or shall live. You are lovable as a child of God. Your neighbor is lovable as a child of God. You are lovable in all of your humanness, as it is your very humanness that was created by a loving God in God's image. We are not, however, gods ourselves. We have been touched by the divine spark, but we are eminently human, fallible, finite, but still magnificent creatures. My hope in this pandemic and far beyond, with all of the time we are spending with ourselves, perhaps we might emerge with a better sense of self, our whole selves, warts, flaws, failings, and all. If we can embrace our entire selves, our complete, complex, contradictory, multifaceted, multi-layered, and multidimensional selves, without criticism, without judgment, and without rejection, we will take a giant first step to realizing a new world. Excuse me. Just one moment. It's a tall order. We need only think of the psychological messages and baggage we carry around with us. The negative, undermining, confidence sapping, anxiety producing messages that are always lurking in our psyches from some internal ancient source that compels us to act negatively towards ourselves and inevitably towards others. Inherent in the stories of our patriarchs and matriarchs, it seems to me, is God's steadfast love and acceptance of them, even as they do terrible things. Abraham lies about Sarah to save his own life. He denies that she is his wife and thus sends her into the king of Egypt's harem. Isaac favors his son Esau over Jacob, and thus sets into motion a saga of sibling rivalry, conflict, and even hatred that spans 2 generations and almost destroys the Israelite people before it even exists. Jacob lies, dissembles, steals, and cheats his brother out of his rightful birthright and blessing, which sends Esau into a murderous rage and Jacob into exile. Finally, Joseph the dreamer provokes and incenses his brothers to the extent that they want to kill him, but sell him into slavery instead. Through it all, God does not abandon them. God is and remains a loving parent to our ancestors. We would do well to do the same, to accept ourselves, to embrace ourselves as the children of God that we are. Let us breathe in this idea for another couple of moments, and then we will conclude. This minute, this instant, this breath is a gift from God, as I am a child of God. My existence as a gift fills me with wonder, with appreciation, with possibility. And I try to breathe out all the negative messages that are obstacles that get in my way, that deny me the full exercise of the humanity I breathe in. If we use any other idea in this process of breathing, we need no other idea other than I am a child of God. We need no other mantra, no other recognition, no other insight. We breathe in. I am a child of God. And if we do that, we will simultaneously breathe out the denial of ourselves, of any part of ourselves. I am a child of God. This breath I am taking is miraculous, It fills me with life, with vitality, with energy, with possibility. We breathe in. I am a child of God, and I breathe out judgment, criticism, denial, obstruction. By way of conclusion and inspiration for the week ahead, I would share this poem from one of my favorites, Mary Oliver. Eat bread and understand comfort. Eat bread and understand comfort. Drink water and understand delight. Visit the garden where the scarlet trumpets are opening their bodies for the hummingbirds who are drinking the sweetness, who are thrillingly gluttonous. For one thing leads to another. Soon you will notice how stones shine underfoot. Eventually, tides will be the only calendar you believe in, and you'll hear the air itself, like a beloved, whisper, "Oh, let me, for a while longer, enter the two beautiful bodies of your lungs." The witchery of living is my whole conversation with you, my darlings. All I can tell you is what I know. Look and look again. This world is not just a little thrill for your eyes. It's more than bones. It's more than the delicate wrist with its personal pulse. It's more than the beating of a single heart. It's praising. It's giving until the giving feels like receiving. You have a life. Just imagine that. You have this day, and maybe another, and maybe still another. We do one thing or another, we stay the same or we change. Congratulations if you have changed. Let me ask you this. Do you also think that beauty exists for some fabulous reason? And if you have not been enchanted by this adventure, your life, what would do for you? What I loved in the beginning, I think, was mostly myself. Never mind that I had to, since somebody had to. That was many years ago. Since then, I have gone out from my confinements, though with difficulty. I mean the ones that thought to rule my heart. I cast them out. I put them on the mush pile. They will be nourishment somehow. Everything is nourishment somehow or another. And I have become the child of the clouds and of hope. I have become the friend of the enemy, whoever that is. I have become older, and cherishing what I have learned, I have become younger. And what do I risk to tell you this, which is all I know? Love yourself, then forget it, then love the world. This week, love yourself, then forget it, then love the world. God bless. See you next time.